There are 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These 4 books each tell the story of Jesus' life. And for every one of these authors, they have a unique focus on the last week of Jesus' life. More than a quarter of every single one of them is devoted to that week. I think that's because this week of Jesus' life, his last week, is the climax of the greatest story ever told. It is in this week that Jesus fulfills what God sent him to do. He completes the promised work of God. And today, we're going to have an opportunity to enter into that story together. In a special way, through dramatic reading, through music, and the sharing of the Lord's Supper, we will enter into the story of Jesus' last week. The words you will hear are straight from the Bible. It's a dark story about betrayal and denial and death. But this story isn't just a story of the past. God still speaks through this story, and you are invited to find yourself in the story. Whether you've heard this story before or today is the very first time, we have the opportunity to let God speak through the story of Jesus' journey to the cross. So right now, I invite you to settle in and be ready to journey with Jesus as he makes his way to the cross, and we will go with him, even to the point of death.
At that, one of the 12, Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests.
"What will you give me to turn him over to you?"
They offered him 30 pieces of silver, and from that moment, he began to watch for a chance to betray Jesus. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples said to Jesus,
"Where would you like us to prepare the Passover meal for you?"
"Go into the city, find a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is near, and I'm going to celebrate Passover at your house with my disciples.'"
So the disciples went off, followed Jesus' instructions, and got the Passover meal ready. When evening came, Jesus sat down with the 12, and they ate their dinner. While they were eating, he said,
"I tell you this, one of you here will betray me."
The disciples, of course, were horrified and said to him,
"Not me."
"Is it I, Lord?"
Is it I?
Who is it?
Is it I?
Who can it be?
"It's not me, Master, is it?"
"The one who shared this dish of food with me is the one who will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as our sacred scripture has taught. But there will be nothing but misery for he who hands him over. That man will wish he had never been born."
At that, Judas, who is indeed planning to betray him, said,
"It's not me, Master. Is it?"
I believe you've just answered your own question.
As they were eating, Jesus took some bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to the disciples, and said,
"Take this and eat. This is my body."
And then he took the cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them and said,
"Take this and drink, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. But I tell you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine again until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom."
When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus told them,
Scripture says, "I shall strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will scatter. Just so, each of you will fall away and become deserters on account of me. But afterward I will be raised up, and I will go before you to Galilee."
Peter said to him,
"Lord, even if they all fall away because of you, I will never desert you."
If only that were true. In fact, this very night, before the rooster crows in the morning, you will deny me 3 times.
No, I won't deny you, even if that means I have to die with you.
And each of the disciples said the same. At that, Jesus led his disciples to the place called Gethsemane and said to them,
I'm going over there to pray. You sit here while I'm at prayer.
Then he took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee with him, and he grew sorrowful and deeply distressed.
My soul is overwhelmed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me.
He walked a little farther and finally threw himself on the ground face down and prayed,
Father, is there any other way? Please take this bitter cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done.
Won't you take this cup from me? For fear has stolen all my sleep. If tomorrow means my death, I pray you'll save their souls with it.
When he came back to the disciples, he saw that they were asleep. And he said to Peter,
So you couldn't keep watch with me for just 1 short hour? Watch and pray so that you may not fall into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak.
With that, Jesus returned for the 2nd time to pray again.
Father, if there is no other way for this cup to pass without my drinking it, then not my will, but yours be done.
In this hour of doubt, I see who I am is not just me. So give me strength to die myself, so love can live to tell the tale.
Again, Jesus returned to his disciples and found them asleep. They just couldn't keep their eyes open. So Jesus left them again for the 3rd time and returned to prayer, praying the same sentiments with the same words. Again, he returned to his disciples.
Well, you are still sleeping? Now the time has come. The Son of Man is just about to be given over to the betrayers and the sinners. Get up. We have to be going. Look, here comes the one who's going to betray me.
There he was, Judas, one of the 12, leading a crowd of people from the chief priests and elders with swords and clubs. The chief priests and elders were right there, ready to arrest Jesus. And Judas, the one who intended to betray him, had said to the elders and the chief priests that he would give them a sign.
I'll greet him with a kiss, and you will know that the one I kiss is the one you should arrest.
So at once he went up to Jesus.
Greetings, teacher.
And he kissed him.
My friend, do what you have come to do.
And at that, the company came and seized him. One of the men with Jesus grabbed his sword and swung toward the high priest's slave, slicing off his ear.
Put your sword back. People who live by the sword die by the sword. Surely you realize that if I called on my Father, he would send a host of angels to rescue me. But if I were to do that, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way?"
That is when Jesus said to the crowds,
"Why did you bring these weapons, these clubs and bats? Did you think I would fight you? That I would try to dodge and escape like a common criminal? You could have arrested me any day when I was teaching in the temple, but you didn't. This has all come about so that the prophecies in the sacred scripture could be fulfilled."
And at that, all the disciples ran away and abandoned him.
If tomorrow means my death, I pray you'll save their souls with it. Father, let my heart be after you. Father, let my heart be after you.
The crowd that had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest. The scribes and elders had gathered at Caiaphas' house and were waiting for Jesus to be delivered. Peter followed Jesus, though at some distance so as not to be seen. He slipped into Caiaphas' house and attached himself to a group of servants, and he sat watching, waiting to see how things would unfold. The high priest and his council of advisors first produced false evidence against Jesus. False evidence meant to justify some charge and Jesus' execution. But even though many men were willing to lie, the council couldn't come up with the evidence it wanted. Finally, 2 men stood up.
"Look, he said, I can destroy God's temple and rebuild it in 3 days. What more evidence do you need?"
Then Caiaphas the high priest stood up and addressed Jesus.
Aren't you going to respond to these charges? What exactly are these 2 men accusing you of?
Jesus remained silent.
Under a sacred oath before the living God, tell us plainly, are you the anointed one, the Son of God?
You have said so. I will say this. Beginning now, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of God's power and glory and coming on heavenly clouds.
The high priest tore his robes and cried out,
Blasphemy! We don't need any more witnesses. We've all just witnessed this most grievous blasphemy right here and now. What's your verdict?
He deserves to die!
Then they spit in his face and hit him. Some of them slapped him, banging him around and saying,
"Well, anointed one, prophesy for us if you can. Who hit you?"
As all of this was going on in Caiaphas' chamber, Peter was sitting in the courtyard with some servants. One of the servant girls came up to him.
"You were with Jesus, the Galilean, weren't you?"
And just as Jesus had predicted, Peter denied it before everyone.
No, not me. I don't know what you're talking about.
He went out to stand by the gate, and as he walked past, another servant girl recognized him.
"That man, over there. He was here with Jesus, the Nazarene."
Again, just as Jesus had predicted, Peter denied it, swearing an oath.
I do not know him.
Peter then went to chat with a few of the servants. A little while later, some other servants approached him.
"Look, we know that you must be one of Jesus' followers. You speak like you're from the same area as his followers. You've got that obvious Galilean accent."
Cursing and swearing, Peter denied him again.
I don't know the man.
As the exclamation left his mouth, a rooster crowed. And Peter remembered. He remembered that Jesus had looked at him with something like pity and said, "This very night,
Before the rooster crows in the morning, you will deny me 3 times."
And Peter went outside, sat down on the ground, and wept. Eventually, the chief priests and the elders looked around and saw that it was morning. They convened a council meeting whose sole purpose was to hand down Jesus' death sentence. They tied Jesus up, took him away, and handed him over to the governor of Judea, a man called Pilate. Judas, the one who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus had been condemned, and suddenly Judas regretted what he had done. He took the silver back to the chief priests and elders and tried to return it to them.
I can't keep this money. I've sinned. I've betrayed an innocent man. His blood will be on my hands.
What do we care? That's your problem.
Judas threw down the money in the temple, went off, and hanged himself. The chief priest looked at the silver coins and picked them up.
You know, according to the law, we can't put these in the temple treasury because it's payment for murder.
After some deliberation, they took the money and bought a plot of land called Potter's Field. They would use it to bury foreigners and others who were unfit for a full Jewish burial. To this day, the field is called Blood Field because it was bought with blood money. And when the priests bought Potter's Field, they unwittingly fulfilled a prophecy made long ago by the prophet Jeremiah. They took 30 pieces of silver, the price set on the head of the man by the children of Israel, and they gave them for the Potter's Field as the Eternal One instructed. Jesus stood before the governor, Pilate, and Pilate asked him,
"Are you the king of the Jews?"
So you say.
But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. So Pilate said to him,
"Do you hear these accusations they are making against you?"
Still, Jesus said nothing, which Pilate found rather astounding. No protest, no defense, nothing. Now the governor had a custom. During the great Jewish festival of Passover, he would allow the crowd to pick one of the condemned men, and he, Pilate, would set that man free. Just like that. Gratuitous, gracious freedom. At this time, they had a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. So when the crowd gathered, Pilate offered them a choice.
"Whom do you want me to free? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?"
For Pilate knew the chief priests and elders hated Jesus and had delivered him up because they envied him. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, Pilate received a message from his wife.
Distance yourself utterly from the proceedings against this righteous man. I have had a dream about him, a dream full of twisted sufferings. He is innocent. I know it, and we should have nothing to do with him.
But the chief priests and the elders convinced the crowd to demand that Barabbas, not Jesus, be freed, and that Jesus be put to death. Again, Pilate said to them,
"Which of these men would you have me free?"
Barabbas!
Barabbas! What would you have me do with this Jesus, who is called Christ?
Kill him! Kill him!
What crime has this man committed?
but they shouted all the more,
Crucify him! Crucify him!
Pilate saw that unless he wanted a riot on his hands, he now had to bow to their wishes. So he took a pitcher of water, stood before the crowd, and washed his hands.
You will see to this crucifixion, for this man's blood will be upon you and not upon me. I wash my hands of it.
Then the people as a whole answered,
Let his blood be upon us and on our children.
be upon us.
Children.
So Pilate released Barabbas, and he had Jesus flogged and handed over to be hanged on a cross. The governor's soldiers took Jesus into a great hall, gathered a great crowd, and stripped Jesus of his clothes, draping him in a bold scarlet cloak, the kind that soldiers sometimes wore. They gathered some thorny vines, wove them into a crown, and perched that crown upon his head. They stuck a stick in his right hand, and then they knelt before him and mocked him, saying,
Hail, King of the Jews!
Some king of the Jews.
They spit on him and whipped him on the head with the stick. And when they had their fill, they pulled off the scarlet cloak, dressed him in his own simple clothes, and led him off to be crucified. As they were walking, they found a man called Simon of Cyrene and forced him to carry the cross. Eventually, they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. There they gave Jesus a drink of wine mixed with bitter herbs to numb the pain. But when he tasted it, he refused to drink it. And they nailed him to a cross. They divided the clothes off his back by drawing lots, and they sat on the ground and watched him hang. They placed a sign over his head that read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." And then they crucified two thieves next to him, one at his right hand and one at his left. Passersby shouted curses and insults at Jesus, shaking their heads and saying,
You are going to destroy the temple and then rebuild it in 3 days?
Why don't you start by saving yourself?
Come down from the cross if you can, if you're God's son.
He saved others, but he can't save himself. If he's really the king of Israel, then let him climb down from the cross. Then we'll believe him. He trusts in God. Well, let God save him if he's God's beloved son.
Even the thieves hanging to his right and left poured insults upon him. And then, starting at noon, the entire land became dark. It was dark for 3 hours. In the middle of the dark afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice,
Eli! Eli! Lama sabachthani.
which means, My
My
God,
God,
my
my
God,
God,
why have you forsaken me?
He's calling on Elijah.
At once, one bystander grabbed a sponge, steeped it in vinegar, stuck it on a reed, and gave Jesus the vinegar to drink. But others said,
We'll see. We'll see if Elijah is going to come and rescue him.
and Jesus cried out loudly once more, and he breathed his last.
when they nailed him to the tree. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in the
And Jesus cried out loudly once more, and he breathed his last. At that instant, the temple curtain was torn in half from top to bottom. The earth shook. Rocks split in two. When the centurion and soldiers who had been charged with guarding Jesus felt the earthquake and saw the rocks splitting and the tombs opening, they were, of course, terrified and exclaimed,
Truly this was God's Son.
A number of women who had been devoted to Jesus and followed him from Galilee were present too, watching from a distance. Mary Magdalene was there, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. At evening time, a rich man from Arimathea arrived. His name was Joseph, and he had become a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked to be given the body of Jesus. Pilate assented and ordered his servants to turn Jesus' body over to Joseph. So Joseph took the body, wrapped Jesus in a clean sheath of white linen, and laid Jesus in his own new tomb, which he had carved from a rock. Then he rolled a great stone in front of the tomb's opening, and he went away. Mary Magdalene was there, and so was the other Mary, sitting across from the tomb. The next day, which is the day after the preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went together to Pilate and said,
When Jesus was alive, he claimed that he would be raised from the dead after 3 days. So please, order someone to secure the tomb for at least 3 days. Otherwise, his disciples might sneak in and steal his body away, and then claim that he has been raised from the dead. If that happens, then we would have been better off just leaving him alive.
Pilate said to them,
You have your own soldiers. Go and secure the grave.
So they went to the tomb, sealed it with a stone, and left the guard to keep watch.
Jesus, they say you walked upon the water once. When you lived as all men do. Please teach me how to walk the way you did. Because I want to walk with you. Jesus, they say you taught a lame man how to dance. When he had never stood without a crutch. Here I am, Lord, holding out my withered hands. I'm just waiting to be touched. Jesus, write me into your story. Whisper it to me and let me know I'm yours. Jesus, they say you spoke and calmed an angry wave. that was tossed across a stormy sea. Please teach me how to listen, how to obey. 'Cause there's a storm inside of me. Jesus, write me into your story. Whisper it to me and let me know I'm yours. Jesus, they drove the cold nails through your tired hands. And rolled a stone to seal your grave. Feels like the devil's rolled a stone onto my heart.